We have illusion that we are right now in a good moment because real is strong, the stock market's strong, so everything's going to be all right. No, the Brazilian currency shows is stronger, but for the wrong reasons, so to speak, now because we have imports that are the imports are stable, and our stock market again are very, very strong, but do situations that are not in Brazil.
I'll talk now to André Perfeito, Chief Economist at Gradual Investimentos, about the stock market here in Brazil. What's the reason about this euphoria in the stock market?
Well, it's very clear that the market is very excited with the latest news in the economic front. It's what we see that Ibovespa index, our main stock index, has climbed very fast in these past weeks, and it's due to the economic reforms that we are facing, but not only. We have a lot of how can I say, from outside from Brazil, from the United States and Europe, a lot of good news also. Why I'm saying that? If you get the 5 biggest companies in the Ibovespa index, we have 2 banks, we have 2 companies from commodities, Petrobras and Vale, and we have a company like Ambev. So Ambev, almost half of their revenue is made outside from Brazil. So when we look to Ambev, we're not looking to Brazil. If you see Petrobras and Vale, also they have a fluctuation very similar to the commodities that they represent, like iron ore and oil barrels also. So when we see Bovespa index, that's my main point. We are not looking to the Brazilian economy. We're looking to the European economy, the Chinese company that are reflected in our stock index. So there's a lot of euphoria. I do believe that it's somehow overvaluated, the Brazilian stock index, but mainly because the Brazilians investors right now are very enchanted. They're very have a lot of trust in the Michel Temer administration. And it's very likely that next year, in 2018, we're going to have elections that's going to be very trouble. We're going to have a lot of trouble and very confusing election next year. So that's why I'm not so optimistic in the medium term to the Brazilian stock index.
Can you continue talking about some sectors in the stock market?
Well, what we see here in Brazil that the banks are performing very well. The Bradesco and Itaú are having very good results, and it's strange because the Brazilian Selic rate is dropping very fast. So that's one, for example, that's one of the reasons that the Brazilian stock index is performing very well, because if the main interest rate, like the Selic rate, is dropping very fast because the inflation is very low, and the inflation is very low because we have economic activity that's not performing well, and also about the foodstuff group. So the IPCA inflation is low, the Selic rate drop. When the Selic rate drop, there is a flow from fixed income to stock markets. But banks are performing well in Brazil. We have also utilities, they're going well also. Brazilian stock market is a very strange market, so to speak. There are a lot of, as we say here in Brazil, jabuticabas, or strange companies that perform very well. And you need to see in detail. But in the short run, in my opinion, it's going to have some more valuation. It can climb a little bit more, the Brazilian stock index. So you need to be aware. You need to have an eye on the Brazilian market to search for opportunities that there are a lot in the short term in Brazil.
As Brazilian people and also foreign investors are used to the high interest rates here in Brazil, what's the main challenge nowadays regarding investments?
Well, Brazilians at large, and the Brazilian investors in particular, we are very, we are not used to work with very low interest rates. For example, in 2005, the risk-free real interest rate, Selic minus IPCA, was around 12%. So when you have a real interest rate about 12%, it's very easy to make money, because anything in the market needs to deliver 12%. Now we have lower interest rate. And I'm very curious about what's going to happen in the Brazilian market next year. The level of interest rate in Brazil is very low right now, and it's going to be very low throughout 2018 and very like 2019 also. But again, low interest rate, it's good for business because we need to create new products, new companies. It's good. But again, it's a challenge for us as Brazilians to live with so little in interest rate terms. And also in 2018, that's my key point. We're going to have an election that's very confusing one, and perhaps we're not sure right now, but perhaps we're going to see a little bit of how can I say that? Turmoil, yes, turmoil in the markets, and it's perhaps going to deliver a little bit higher interest rate by the end of 2018.
I would ask you about the monetary policy, if it will continue this way, even with this problem regarding our debt.
Yeah, well, for our debt, it's a serious question. We didn't solve that yet about our fiscal imbalances. For example, we approved last year a debt ceiling in Brazil. So the Brazilian spending, the government spend, can't be higher than the inflation from the previous year. This year inflation is going to be about 3%. It's quite clear for me that the government is going to spend more than 3% next year. So you have a problem in our hands right now. And also, in the short run, the fiscal imbalance in Brazil is not a problem of expanding, but the revenues of the government. The revenues are falling very fast because the Brazilian activity is not performing well. So we have a serious question about that. But the Brazilian market is again, many investors are, how can I say that, very enthusiastic about the government. So they don't see the awful truth about our fiscal situation. So it's going to be a problem for the Brazilian Central Bank to control or to keep low interest rates throughout 2018.
And what's the trend of our currency, real, related to dollar and euro?
Well, as I said, when we were talking about the stock market, what I said is when you see Bovespa index, you are not seeing Brazilian economy. You are seeing economies from Europe, China, United States, because our companies are very linked, the big companies in Brazil are very linked to the wealth or to the economic situation from these companies. When you see currency, real, it's very strange because the real right now is stronger against US dollar especially. And that's why it's happened, because you have a trade balance that have a very high surplus right now. So if you have a surplus in your trade balance, dollars are coming in Brazil, real got stronger against US dollar. But the trade balance have good surplus, big surplus right now, because we're exporting more, but the imports are stable. So the imports stable shows that our economy is not performing well. So, but again, it appears, we have an illusion that we are right now in a good moment because real is strong, the stock market is strong, so everything's going to be all right. No, the Brazilian currency shows is stronger, but for the wrong reasons, so to speak, now because we have imports that are the imports are stable, and our stock market again are very, very strong, but do situations that are not in Brazil. The iron ore climbed last weeks. The oil has climbed also, so that makes our stock index stronger, but again, it's not showing the real situation in Brazil, in my opinion.
Are you optimistic with our GDP for next year?
Well, the GDP is very likely it's going to be higher than this year. I'm forecasting about 3% hike in the GDP next year. But again, it's very easy to have a 3% GDP against a very low comparison from previous year. 2017 is you're going to have a climb of 0.5%, 0.1% in our GDP. But again, what I see that 2018 we can have a good economic numbers in 2018. But my question is in the medium long run. We are going to have a situation that is stable in political terms, is stable in economic terms. I'm not so optimistic about that, in my opinion. Brazil is a very unequal society, so you had a lot of populism that can emerge from this political turmoil that we are seeing right now in Brazil.
Let's talk now about elections next year. What are the scenarios regarding scenarios for the economy, please, regarding the favorite candidates?
Well, last month we had 3 electoral polls that were released, and the former president Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, Lula, is the favorite, undisputed favorite of these scenarios for next year. So I do not believe that he's going to run for election in 2018. In my opinion, he very probably he's going to be arrested or something like that this year in 2017. And but again, what Lula power shows to us is that the Brazilian population is not willing to have more reforms in Brazil, because the second candidate that have strong it's Jair Bolsonaro. That it's a right-wing candidate, but he's a right-wing when we talk about customs. But when we talk about economy, he's a very state person, state guy. He would like big state, as Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva also like it. So it's not very clear for us right now what's going to be the outcome of this election. But for economy, we have to deal with a very, very substantial fiscal problem next year again. We have problems with our revenue, and the Brazilian economy, even if it grows 3%, it's not enough to increase the revenues of the government in the same pace to control the debt of the Brazilian, the pace of the Brazilian debt. So it's a very complex situation. Brazil is a good business at large. All the things in Brazil that they're performing well, in my opinion. So, but I'm not so optimistic as my colleagues, economists, or other market participants. I do believe that we need to have some precautions right now.
André Perfeito, thank you so much for joining us again here in Dukascopy TV.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Luciane Miranda to Dukascopy TV.